My name is Lisa Kaufman, and I am an attorney. I've been a lawyer for 25 years now. I've done predominantly criminal defense work, and in the last, I'd say 8 to 10 years, I've been doing more and more of what we call child welfare work, or child abuse and neglect cases, and that's the kind of cases that you're getting involved in. In Missoula, they're called DN cases. So you'll often, when you look at the calendar, you come to the courtroom, you're wandering around trying to figure out where you are. They have a calendar list of all the cases up in the morning, and the ones that have the DN, stands for dependency neglect, those are the ones that you're going to be appearing on. They're all sealed cases, they're confidential, so nobody can wander in and out of the courtroom during them. But CASAs can sit in the courtroom, even if it's not your case, as part of your training and experience. So that's what you do or will do. I'm sorry that I came before the prosecutor, because the prosecutor would spend a lot of time telling you legally what has to happen, what the burden of proof is, what petitions are filed, what day, all the timelines, right? He was going to tell you all that stuff. So I hope you pay attention Wednesday. I have represented mostly parents, but about 30% of my work, I represent children. So I want to address being an attorney representing either parents or children in these cases, because there is some striking differences. So you may ask yourself, well, why would the child even have an attorney if there's a CASA on the case, right? And if you're thinking that or asking yourself that, you're part of a national debate that plays out differently in every state, in different cities, as to whether or not a child even needs an attorney if they have a CASA or have a GAL. Have you heard the word GAL? Yeah, guardian ad litem. Okay, and that's a whole nother debate, whether CASAs are GALs, and not one that I'm going to bore you with tonight, but I would be happy to talk about it any other time. So in Missoula, and again, I keep saying Missoula because if you move to other parts of the state, you may find that the CASA has a different role. The judges might expect something different from you. It may feel a little different. So I'm just talking about Missoula, although I've practiced in other areas. I'm assuming that's where most of you are going to be hanging out for a while. So in Missoula, we have 4 judges. Those are the only 4 judges that hear these DN cases, okay? And when you get assigned a case, you're basically going to be walking into a firestorm, okay? There is a debate, a national debate, on whether or not children, and let's not talk about whether or not they can talk yet, let's just say children, anybody under the age 18, when they're involved in these types of cases, these child welfare cases, whether or not somebody should be representing their express wishes or their best interests. I firmly believe that a child deserves the right to a traditional attorney, that is a duty of confidentiality, should be able to represent their express wishes to the court, and I fight for that. And as a result of that, there have been some discussion and a little bit of alienation here and there, because other people feel very strongly that children simply don't have the capacity to have an expressed wish that's in their best interest, and therefore, as the attorney for a child, you must only represent their best interests. And then some attorneys who are appointed to represent kids do sort of a mishmash. They listen to what the kid says, they kind of do what they want, but if they don't think it's in their best interest, they'll tell the court, okay? So just understand that even among attorneys, there's not a clear role definition of what it means to be an attorney for a child. Now you, as the CASAs, you are there for their best interests. There's no doubt about it. But you'll find, as you get to know these kids, that you're going to want to also make sure their voice is heard. And if they're saying, I really want to go home, right, and everybody else thinks it's not in their best interest to go home, you may find yourself trying to decide, gosh, what should I put in my report? Well, just put it both in, right? Your job, and you'll learn, or you have learned, or you will learn about report writing and things like that. The judges really rely on you to be the judge's eyes and ears. And there's sort of this assumption that you have no agenda, right? That you are like the cleanest player in this because you don't really have a client. Although you're looking out for the child, you don't really have a client, you're not being paid. So, you know, why would you do anything other than accurately represent everything and be perfect? Well, a lot of attorneys, you'll find, if you have honest discussions with them, do not like the role that the CASA gets to play, because you sort of get the superior position in the courtroom. The judges really rely on you. They count on you to sort of be that voice that tells them, no, don't listen to all those people. They're all fighting for some other agenda. And that makes attorneys mad because, you know, we have power issues. But besides that, it makes them feel, you know, we have the training, we have the experience, we're filing the motions, we know the law. And here's this basically lay person, right, who's had 8 weeks of training, that's basically telling the court what to do regarding the life of a child. Now, I share that with you because not that that's true across the board. You're going to find plenty of attorneys that don't have an opinion or haven't really thought about it or like you or think you have an important role. I mean, you know, we're all human, so you're going to find all that. But understand that you have a really important role in this county with these judges because they really rely on your insights and count on you. So keeping that in mind, let's move on to why I'm here. So I want to start, and I do engage in a lot of conversation, hopefully with you guys, but I just want to give you a little overview that we talk about abuse and neglect, and somebody somewhere has to define it. What is it? What is abuse and what is neglect? And I think that it's not necessarily what the state always says it is. So the state will file a petition with this affidavit from the social worker, and that's what Sheila maybe talked about a little bit, and Matt will talk about on Wednesday night. And it'll lay out all these reasons that the child either has been abused and neglected or is at risk of being abused and neglected. And I want to really emphasize it is not necessarily what's written on that piece of paper, but that piece of paper can be very seductive. Sometimes it's 30 pages long. I went to the house on this day and I saw this, and then when I went back the next day and I tried to talk to the mom and then she wouldn't let me in, and 2 weeks later, you know, you'll see this history of a CFS worker who's tried to perhaps work with the family, and you'll read it and you'll be like, my goodness, I got to get that kid out of there, right? Or I support what CFS is doing, this poor kid, right? Be careful of that. And I know you've all heard, I don't believe everything that you read in print, but it's so true in these cases, because what the CFS worker, like Sheila, is doing often is relying on what other people have told her, okay? So you really, really, really have to do your own independent investigation when you first get a case. Now, of course, you're going to read the CFS information. You're going to get a general idea of why are they involved, why was this kid removed from their parents, you know, why was I appointed, a CASA, right? But make sure, read it, take a deep breath, and start making your plan of how you're going to investigate. And I strongly encourage you to contact the parents. Now, a lot of CASAs in the past didn't do that. They would read the paperwork, they would go meet with the kid, don't worry, we're here, we're going to protect you, you're going to be okay. Your bad parents, don't worry about them. You've been taken from your bad parents, and everything's going to be okay. My favorite Emily CASA. And so just be careful that when you read the stuff that's on the paperwork, that you don't accept all of it as true. And Emily probably could really speak to that. She's certainly had experience. What I'm saying is that everything that you read in the CFS affidavit about what's going on in the home isn't always 100% accurate, because they often have to rely on what other people tell them, or they don't always hear the other side of the story.
Yeah.
Is that a fair?
Second thing that you just said.
Yeah, they don't always hear the other side of the story. So Emily has also been very aggressive in the cases I've had with her in meeting the parents, talking with the parents, getting the other. There's always two sides to a story. And there's always truth on both sides. And that's part of your investigation. So just like in a criminal case, just because the police report says this is a terrible, horrible person and he did these terrible, horrible things doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% accurate. And I'm not saying the police lie or that the CFS workers lie. It's not a matter of lying. It's a matter of mistaken information, hearsay, making mountains out of molehills, etc., which will circle back to our bias discussion later. So I just say right off the bat, don't accept everything you read when you first get a case. I also want to say something that always surprises people. And let me back up for just a second, because you haven't had the benefit of the prosecutor explaining how you sort of get these cases and what happens. I'm just talking about cases that have actually been filed in a court where a child has actually, or children have been removed from their parents, okay? And then you get the call. Can you get involved, right? You may get calls in cases where the kid is still home. Maybe the state is not filed yet. I'm not quite sure all your internal rules on that. But I'm focusing on the cases where the kid has been removed. CFS has said there is an emergency situation, there's a danger, and this kid's got to come out of the home, okay? And then you get the call from Dennis, will you take this case, okay? The state of Montana, CFS, can be very motivated by their own internal policies in terms of funding incentives for making various decisions. Now, people are always sort of shocked when I say that, and I'm not saying that they're out there just to make money. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is that some of their choices they make internally are based on funding. And the federal government spends, I think the last time I looked was maybe 99% or 100% more on supporting children that are in foster homes than in their biological homes.
Can you talk more about the funding incentives? Like, do you have examples for that?
Well, you know, I should probably, I'll tell you something. Every time I've spoke, I tweak a little bit based on the comments I get given back to me through Dennis, and so then I try to add, and you're the first person that's asked for something, so now I'll add that to my list, and I promise I'll get it. But there is the 1974, whatever it's called, I'll have to find it for you, but it was the National Child Welfare Act, and certain funding incentives were set up because at that time, kids were being removed and just languishing in foster homes, and nobody was paying attention to them, and they were being abused in foster homes. And you'd show, I know because I worked in these courts in the 80s in Chicago. You know, I worked in these cases, and we'd show up in court, and the judge, everybody would be there, all the attorneys and the tribes, if there was Indian kids involved, and the judge would, you know, get a status on the parents and then turn around and go, and so how's the kid doing? And everyone, I remember everyone would sort of look at each other like, I don't know, did you see the kid? I don't know, have you seen the kid? You know, and that's where CASA and other victims' rights organizations have sort of sprung out of this sort of failure to pay attention to the kid. But now, and this is my opinion, I think the pendulum has swung too far, and now everybody's looking out for the kid, and it's like the parents and the family unit has been somewhat dismissed in an effort to protect children, right? So, long answer to short question, there are federal statutes, and I will find them, and actually Matt is a nationally certified child welfare expert. He may have those statistics at his fingertips, but there is funding incentives for states that they get more money when they support a kid in a foster home placement than in a biological home. And that has to be changed, and it may be changed, and I don't have the time or the energy to change it. But it's one of those things on my list to do before I die. So, I want, the other thing to understand is that most of these kids who are removed because of abuse or neglect, and I say that, you know, not to be cheesy, but I say that because nobody can really agree what is abuse and neglect. And we're not talking about the extreme examples. Clearly, if somebody's beating their kid or hitting them over a head with fry pans or sexually abusing them, there's not a discussion of whether that's abuse. You are going to find that the majority of the cases are poverty, and therefore the issues are neglect. And the neglect comes from the poverty. The neglect also comes from, and I know I'm just going to put this into like a top 10 list at some point. I would say that 95% of the parents whose children are removed either were foster kids themselves who aged out of the system and then had kids, never had any parents or parenting role models, no education or low education, victims of domestic violence or abusers because they were once victims of domestic violence, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and pain, medical issues. Pain, medical issues. I challenge anybody to come and show me a parent that doesn't fall into one or maybe all of these categories in every case that you have. Because that's the problem. The problem is their lack of education, parenting, love, right? All the things that you're trying to protect and do for their kids is what they need. So I'm always advocating for parents. Even when I represent kids, I'm advocating for the parents because and this is my personal belief, and we're going to talk about personal beliefs, I think the best interest of a kid is to be with a healthy parent and not to be raised by strangers or put into a group home. So I would do everything I can, representing the kid or the parent, to make the parent healthy so they can function and be a parent. So we'll just...
Isn't that what the system defaults to? I mean, that's the intent, at least on in writing.
No, that's a great question. And I think I'd love for a night for Matt and I to be here together. Maybe that's something we should think of in the future. I would guess that Matt's answer would be, of course, we want families to be healthy. Of course, we want kids to be back with their parents. Of course, we want to help the parents, right? So there's what I call lip service that talks a lot about family preservation and family reunification and all these words that you're going to hear. I don't see it playing out. And I don't see it playing out because of, and we'll talk about this, I promise, biases, funding, unskilled workers, psychological, what's the word, opinions about who can parent and who can't, right? So, and we're going to get into a lot of this stuff. But what I'm trying to do is, and this is, again, trying to give you more of the bigger picture rather than the little picture of what you're going to do every day. So I want to just give you some examples. So that leads to the next part, which is you're here because you're supposed to do what's in the best interest of a kid, right? And that just sounds like that's it. You just do what's in their best interest and you've made the right decision. So I have a question, and my question is, how many of you are married and that have a child? At 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. Do you and your spouse ever have a disagreement about what might be in your best interest of your child on any given day? And what would be a good example?
Well, how to help a kid with homework.
Right. Should you help them a lot so they do well and they get the A?
Or how much do you require them to figure it out on their own? So you're not always, there's that balance.
Right. And do you love your wife? I promise I won't quote you.
Yeah, there's a yes, she'll be here in a little bit.
Okay. So, in a loving, functioning, healthy marriage, the disputes surrounding what's best for a kid on a daily basis can be a matter of dispute. So you can only imagine that in these cases, what's in the best interest of a kid. What does CFS think is in their best interest? What does the parent think? What does the CASA think? What does the therapist think? You're going to have 20 opinions on every case. And that's what we fight about. I mean, that's where some of the tensions come, right? So let me give you a couple examples of what our government has done in the past in the best interest of children, okay? How many of you are familiar with any of the history surrounding Indian kids being taken from their homes and placed into white Christian missionary schools? Anybody?
Here, Australia, where?
Right. I try to keep it as regional and local as I can. But so, what was the government's reason? Let's just get the facts straight. It's true that the government would go into Indian homes and say, we are going to remove your child because it's in their best interest to be assimilated or acculturated into the white Christian society because that's the only way they'll be successful. Right? We're doing this for their own good. We're doing this for you, Mr. and Mrs. Native American parent, right? We're doing this so your child can be successful. So everybody who knows this history.
Not parents who have shown any abuse or neglect.
Right.
Clarify. Just good, normal parents.
Right. Just because they were Indian and because there was a problem with assimilating Native Americans off reservations into white culture, the government decided very paternalistically that this was what would be best. This is how they could succeed, and therefore we're going to do it. And so, hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, in Montana alone, the stories I keep hearing, kids are being dragged, cut off their braid, make them wear shoes because they ran around like a bunch of wild Indians, right, with no shoes on, or whatever the cultural biases were. And we did that. We did that all the way up. There's still people who talk about having been in boarding schools in the 1960s, which isn't, for some of you, it may seem pretty long ago, but, I was born then, so that doesn't seem that long ago to me. it's now a source of shame, embarrassment, humiliation on the part of the quote-unquote white government. And just like slavery, it's something we have to repair, apologize for, make amends for, whatever. But that's an example of when you do something that you think is in a child's best interest, which is just wrong. And it's not fair, and it's not right, and it's not supportive of family. Okay? Another example I'd love to share is that I found a study, and I do have the quote somewhere in this pile, but I'm not going to waste time now. In World War II, in London, they were being bombed, right? They're at war, bombs are coming down. 1 million people lived in London, maybe more, I don't know. Maybe 2 million people and 1 million kids or something. So the government of England decided that it was in the kids' best interest to be taken from this war-torn, highly traumatizing hostility, right, and moved to the country with foster family and other families and make them safe. This is for their best interests. It's going to help them succeed. It's going to protect them. It was all done paternalistically, all done with an eye towards we know what's best for the children, and we're going to put them all out in the country, right? Some parents refused to do it. It was like a government sanctioned thing. People got in trouble. I don't know exactly how it all played out, but ultimately thousands of kids were moved out to the country in London during World War II. Many of the kids remained in the city with their parents, with the bombs coming down and with the threat of death every day. Now, if that's not a traumatic situation, I can't imagine too many other more traumatic situations than living under those conditions, right? Well, a longitudinal study was done over like a 40-year period that tracked the lives of the kids, both who remained in the city and who went to the country. And it's really a fascinating study to read because the kids who remained with their parents, even though they were in a traumatic living situation, were more successful psychologically, emotionally, cognitively, just across the board on how you measure success than the kids who were safe in the country but not with their parents. And so I read things like that, I hear about things like that, and it just makes me want to keep every kid in their family as much as possible. So we're going to talk about some examples, and you're going to be shocked at some of the situations that I think kids should still remain home. And services should be brought to the home to strengthen the family and make the parents better parents. So I'm very opposed to removals, to kids being placed in other homes, group homes, foster homes, if there's any possibility they can be safe in the home with their parents, okay? And that's the big question, okay? That is, what is a risk? What is the safety risk, okay? Now, let me try to find my one thing here. There's an area of Missoula called Grant Creek where a lot of people who make money live. I can guarantee you that there's probably a parent or two up in Grant Creek that drinks too much. I can guarantee you that of one of those several parents with a lot of money in a nice home who drinks too much has drank to excess to the point where it's placed their child at risk. Now, you say, well, how? Well, driving home from a party. I'm fine, I can drive, right? The kid's in the car. Passing out at home, maybe with a young kid, not being able to meet their needs because they're passed out on the couch. Sleeping in too late, right? They had too many glasses of wine the night before, slept in. The 2-year-old's over by the stove trying to figure out how to get breakfast, right? This is happening. Now, what happens is you don't get involved in those cases. The one you'll get is the mother who uses meth. And as a result of using meth, her 2-year-old's at the stove trying to make a hot dog at, 8 in the morning when she's passed out. And everyone will go, meth addict, oh my God, get this kid out of here, right? This stems back to the bias question. Why do we stigmatize somebody who uses meth more than we stigmatize somebody who abuses alcohol when the risk to the child is the same, right? The risk is the same. And we do it because we're so opposed to meth and because of how we feel about that. And we'll circle back to this when we could talk about biases. But you really got to think about these things. What is the risk to the kid, right? If mom uses alcohol or smokes marijuana or does meth, does it after the kid's asleep, is up in the mornings, got breakfast, gets the kid to school, is there a risk, right? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be involved at all in those cases. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that that parent needs help, right? Obviously, treatment would be helpful. We want to help that parent be a better parent, but we don't necessarily have to remove the child if there's no risk. And that's the question you have to ask yourself when you're trying to decide, where should this kid live and when should he stay home? Should he be in a temporary shelter, right? What is the risk of that child remaining in the home? And CFS will always have plenty of reasons why it's a safety risk. But that's a question you're going to have to constantly do soul searching on and really think about when you're making your investigations and your decisions. Okay. The other thing I want to say sort of off the cuff is just that, remember, everyone's looking out for the kids. Everybody, right? You, the judge. The judge is actually charged in the statute with the child's welfare is of paramount importance. I think that's what they're charged with in the statute, meaning they're supposed to be the ultimate looker-outer for the kid. You guys. The prosecutor who represents CFS, right? The CFS worker, Sheila, that you heard from last week. Nobody's really looking out for the parents, okay? And I think it's important to respect the work that the attorneys do who represent the parents, because at least for me, I'm trying to shake everybody all the time and say, it's in this kid's best interest to have a healthy mom and dad, you know? Let's put some energy there. Let's not put up all these walls, right? Bad parents, safe kid, right? Let's break down that wall and figure out a way to keep this family intact. Now, just a couple sort of practical things. I heard Dennis mentioning the Attention Home and Watson's and all these sort of places. And please don't ever feel like you're supposed to know what that means or where they are or what they do, because there's a lot of acronyms that you're going to fall into in these cases. Don't ever feel stupid if you say, what's the A-Home? You know, what's Watson's? They have how many locations? You know, I can just tell you that it helps to go to these places, because the A-Home, which is the Attention Home, is in Missoula. They have a similar place in Hamilton called the B-Home. And so you get to know these sort of colloquial, you know, expressions. It's just a house. It's just a house with bedrooms and a kitchen and a living room. And then there's like staff people that have an office, and then that's where kids live. Some are more permanent, some are temporary. But, you know, that's what they are. They're just homes. I mean, houses. And then they each have different sort of names. Okay? So before I go to my next area, do you have questions so far? Yeah.
Do you ever feel that there are situations where a family unit should not be kept together?
I always get asked that question. It's a great question. Yes. Here's how I've tried to evolve in this work, okay? I had some very definite opinions when I started, and I've really always tried to embrace change and listen to people that I disagree with fundamentally, and evolve as a person and try to get some wisdom and not just be sort of reactionary. So what I've sort of learned is, this is how I sort of make sense to me. And CFS, and you should get this statistic, Dennis, or this chart if you can, but CFS, I think, is a state agency. If you look at their work, it's like a pyramid, upside down pyramid, like the food pyramid, I get. No, upside down food pyramid. And the top of it, they have some sort of a chart where they show this, is how many reports they get a year of somebody calling in and saying, I know a kid is being abused and neglected, right? And I think it's like 10,000. You have something like that?
It's in a circle, not a triangle.
Pyramid. Oh, it used to be in a pyramid. Okay. Well, anyway, then out of those 10,000 reports, you know, the next thing is how many do they actually go out and send somebody to investigate? And that's like another 8,000 or something, or 6,000, where they actually go to the house and say, were you home when Bobby said his daddy hit him? Oh, yeah, I was here. His dad didn't hit him. That didn't. He's just mad because he took the car away. Okay, thank you. And then they leave, right? So that's like the next 7,000, right? And then after that, there's the ones they actually substantiate. Right? That's their word, substantiate, where they've gone to the house and they said, yeah, you punched your kid, but you know what, we're going to substantiate it, but we're not going to take any action because it was situational and, you know, your mother just died and we're going to understand, or whatever the situation, okay? So then we're paring down. By the time a case gets to court and I get involved, it's like the bottom of the barrel. These are the people, these are the families that CFS has either worked with already, given up on, don't know what else to do. I mean, this is the toughest population to deal with, and that's who I represent, right? And that's who I fight with Matt Lowy about all the time. I mean, we are dealing with the most marginal people in our community, right, who have children. So, do I ever think that a family should not be reunified? Of course. I mean, there's some parents that, first of all, abandonment. I mean, if they can't show up for their visits, right, to see their kids, when their kids are not in their care, or they miss meetings, they never call their attorney, except to complain that CFS has their kid, right? You know, at some point, there's only so much you can do, and that kid deserves the right to have a family, right? And so I get that. I think that decision is often made prematurely, and I think that decision is also made very presumptively, okay? When you deal with this population of people, these parents, these people, what I'm basically saying is poor people is really what it is. Poor people with no real skills or education or a lot of, you have to have some humanity, and you have to have forgiveness, and you have to be able to give them hope and make them feel good, because these people have been told their whole lives that they're pieces of crap, that they'll never amount to anything, that they don't deserve to have children. They don't need to hear that, right? They need to hear they can do it, they can do it, they can do it. And that's what that strength-based stuff is that you were sort of mentioning. And I don't know what Sheila said, you know, but I just sat in a meeting with Sheila today for almost 2 hours. And there's just this judging. So I'm sitting next to this 22-year-old woman who has a 2.5-year-old who got thrown in jail for her 3rd DUI, and they took her kid, and the kid's now at a temporary shelter. And here she is on her own, has no family, has nobody. She was a victim of sex abuse. The child is actually a product of an incestual relationship, but she happens to love the big brother, you know, whatever. I mean, it gets really, really complicated. But she wants to be a mom. And she's bright, right? And her daughter loves her. You go and you watch them together at Watson's, and the little girl loves her mom. So what do? Do we just say, well, you know, you relapsed and you couldn't hold down a job and you let bad people come in your apartment and smoke marijuana, and, you know, we could go through that list of everything she's done wrong, which is part of what Sheila did and does. And I'm next to her going, it's okay, we'll deal with all that, we'll deal with it. Let's talk about the good stuff, right? She was getting her GED on her own, trying to, while she was raising a 2-year-old on her own. She figured out how to get housing on her own, right? These are huge battles, right? So I take it as my job to kind of come in. As you're putting your arm around the kid, I'm putting my arm around the parent, right? And I'm trying to see if I can give them enough services and enough training and enough love, which sounds sort of cheesy, but these people have never experienced somebody caring about them. And I have so many success stories of women, mostly moms that I've worked with, and dads, who, if given the opportunity to show that they can do it and not feel judged and second-guessed and made to feel inadequate, because they are going to make mistakes, right? They are going to let you down. You are going to find at some point that you don't know if you can find something else to believe in. Then, you know, your decision may ultimately be that they shouldn't have their kids back. But I'm always going to fight for them to have their kid back if they have that relationship. That to me. Now, kids taken from birth from the hospital because mom or dad, I don't know, smoking weed in the hospital room. I don't know, whatever. CFS takes the baby, let's say, from the hospital, gives the baby to a foster parent, and we spend the next 12 months, and I can't even get the parents to go in and visit the kid. You know, I'm not going to sit there and say, well, this child deserves to be with this family. The child doesn't even know the family, right? But I'm not talking about cases like that. I'm talking about cases when the kids are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and they've been with this mom or dad forever through all the ups and downs, and families are a system, right? Families are our system. All right, I'm doing way too much talking. I want to start with you. What is it that you do for a living?
Oh, I'm an attorney, but I don't practice in Missoula. And what I did is I started a business that I do a lot of employment law investigations, unbiased employment law investigations.
Okay, that's great. So that's why you brought up the issue of bias. So here's what happens to, and I really want Emily.
Plus, I'm incredibly judgmental because I'm sitting there listening to you, and all I want to do is
Save the kid.
No, I'm like, well, your examples are distinguishable about London, and because we're talking about families that the family wasn't creating the danger. Right, but anyway, that's me.
No.
So I'm listening to all of this.
That's a great point. But why? Okay.
The DUI scenario, I'm kind of like, but if I turn around and I put a kid back in a mother's car, right, and she has her 4th DUI and accident and kills that kid, did I do my job?
And that's
I understand what your job is.
No, but that's a great question. And we have to be able to work those things out. So you're talking about the case that I was just referring to, the girl that okay. So in that case, I didn't ask for the child to be returned yet. I said, let's get her into some treatment. Let's get her into some therapy. Let's get her some traction, right? But let's get visits going so that she doesn't lose relationship with the child. So I didn't ask for return. Now, at some point I will. It'll be sooner than CFS will think mom is ready, okay? Because that's it's this pacing thing. They always, wow, and I always want to push, and that's what we do. You as a CASA would say, her daughter loves her, and I think she's doing great in treatment, and she's making all her therapy appointments, but I'm still kind of concerned about the driving thing. So then we would work out maybe a situation where she's not allowed to drive, the kid. And then we work out, well, okay, how does she get to school? Well, she doesn't go to school, she's 2. Well, what if she has to go to the store? Oh, maybe there's a neighbor that can come over and watch the kid. Well, problem solve, right? We don't just say, I don't feel good about that kid being in this mom's car who's on her 3rd DUI, so I'm not returning that kid. You figure out what is the problem and how can we problem solve around that. And that's exactly what I'm encouraging the CASA to do when I come to speak to them, is to know, and this is the next section that I talk about, is to know what your biases are. So for example, when I was in Chicago and I first started working some of these cases in Chicago, I remember the first home I went to of a parent, and I was with the police officer at the time, and doesn't matter what the facts are. And I remember him saying, when you get to the door, just stamp your feet the whole time you're in there, right? He said, stamp your feet. I'm like, what? What do you mean? He goes, just stamp them, because that way the cockroaches can't go up your pant legs. You'll just go like this. So when you're talking to people, just do this, right? And I'm like, why would I even want to go into a house that has cockroaches? So that was just kind of an example of sort of an eye-opening. And then going into places, the drapes are odd drawn. The TV's blasting. There's no lights on. The kitchen is filthy. There's dishes stacked up in the sink. You open the fridge and there's a case of beer and a bottle of ketchup. You know what I'm saying? How can you not, as human beings, develop certain judgments, right? And say to yourself, oh my goodness, I got to get this kid out of here, right? I wouldn't want to live here. I wouldn't want my kid to live here, right? And I think those are natural responses, and those are the biases I'm talking about. We all have them. And those are the biases I'm asking you to check at the door, right? And this is why. These cases are not about finding a better place for children. It's not what our job is. It's not yours, mine, the judges. It's not about finding them a better home or a better place. The only question is, can they be safe in that home? Can they be safe? And I can see the look on your face makes you mad, right? Because you want to be able to give these kids a better life. And you're going to see situations where a kid is thriving in a foster home, thriving. All of a sudden, they don't have a speech delay anymore, and the foster mother is perfect, and they're going to school that they've never gone to before, and they've put on a little weight because they're getting 3 regular meals, and they're not having nightmares, and all these wonderful things are happening, and you go, oh, this is great. This is why I did this work, because now this kid is going to have this great life with this home. No. Can't be seduced by that, okay? You just can't. You have to constantly circle back to, can this kid be safe with the family that had them, the family they're from? Now, you'll differ about what is safe. And you may decide, well, they're not safe there. That's why I love this foster home. This is a great place for this kid because this isn't safe. And then you got to sort of ask yourself, am I just saying the birth home is unsafe because I really love this foster home and the kid's doing so well? And it's hard. I mean, if this was easy, you know, everybody would do it, and they don't. Attorneys burn out in this work. Social workers burn out in this work. CASA workers will...
The hardest decision, though, isn't so much the physical safety, it's the emotional, what's that third, the second one?
Psychological abuse.
Care.
The emotional care. The emotional, they have to also meet a certain level of emotion.
And I think that's a great point, and let's talk about that. So surrounding the emotional realm and emotional health of children is the field of psychology. Do we have anybody here, psychologists, trained, undergrad, classes? So psychological theories about what's healthy for people come and go, okay? And I always love to give this example, even though it's extreme, and I'm not doing it to be dramatic. It's just food for thought. All of this is just for you to think about stuff. But, you know, in the 1960s, if we thought people were crazy, we gave them lobotomies. That was accepted scientific routine, right? You're crazy. We don't know how to control your behavior, so we're going to take out part of your brain, right? It was accepted. It was prevalent. It was done a lot. It was cruel. It was irreversible. I mean, all sorts of problems. And we used to have insane asylums. Remember those? You know, mental health state institutions where, you know, if people acted crazy, we didn't have the right medication. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to intervene and make them safe or make people around them safe, so we put them in these institutions. Retarded kids, right, that we now call on the autistic spectrum, right? We have this nice name now that explains these sort of unexplainable behaviors of kids who fall on this autistic spectrum, right? In the old days, that was a retard and you locked them up for life, right? So the field of psychology and how we explain human behavior and then what the recommendations are is really fluid. It's a very fluid field. So, I mean, when I started this work, every kid had ADHD. Every kid had to be treated for ADHD. Every kid got Ritalin or something with some amphetamine in it. And then they had all these sorts of other behaviors as a result of the medicine, right? Well, that's kind of come and burned itself out and moved on. I mean, there's still a lot of, I'm not saying ADHD isn't real. ADHD is real. ADD is real. Some kids definitely need medicine. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it sort of spiked into an explanation for all sorts of unexplainable behaviors, and then kids were over-medicated. Again, in their best interests, right? Yeah.
Back to the earlier topic on getting therapy for the parent and everything else, that all comes to funding, and that was something you said earlier was a huge issue. Where does the funding come for? Is it all paid by Medicare?
That's a great question, and actually, somebody should have asked Sheila some of those questions. I'll tell you the little bit I know. Medicaid covers like 99% of what goes on in these cases. Is it always that the parent has to have Medicaid to get the service like therapy? No. CFS will pay for a parent to be engaged in therapy if it's towards reunification. CFS will pay for a lot. They'll pay.
For the kids?
No.
Ongoing treatment?
No.
Is there a limited number of 15 sessions?
No, there's not. There's not a limited number of sessions, and there's not a limited amount of money, but the case will end at some point because the child's been out of care too long. So let me ask you if you know this concept. Don't let me forget answering fully that question, but let me just see, does people here know the concept that if a child's been out of a parent's care for 15 continuous months? She did. Okay, then the state has an obligation to file a petition to terminate that parent's rights or explain why not. They can file a motion saying we don't think it's in the kid's best interest to terminate, but they never do that, even though I always tell them to do. But anyway, but that's the general rule, okay? So after 15 months, if the parents haven't gotten it together enough to be a parent, there's this presumption that it's in the kid's best interest to terminate their rights. I'm fundamentally opposed to terminating parents' rights. I think it's like the death sentence in a criminal case. I think that when we as a community put a microscope on any family, especially these marginalized families, we are going to find issues that they've been dealing with their whole lives, and maybe they're 30, and I don't know if we can address all their issues in 15 months. And I think that's an arbitrary and unfortunate line in the sand that's been drawn. But anyway, that's why I fight and do what I do. But yeah.
Well, I mean, anybody that's been around very long has seen government do things that are,
Brilliant.
well, has seen them do things that are unfair, misguided, overreaching, whatever you want to call it. Not say they don't do some good things, but if you've been around any time at all, you see that. But, I mean, it seems like that the standards we're looking at are best interest, which is a safe home, a permanent home as quickly as possible. So that quickly as possible part, I mean, you've already said, you just said, it seemed a little conflicting to me. You said you're fundamentally opposed to termination, but then you said there are times when it can be terminated. So accepting those circumstances, you're saying you think they should have as much time as they need unless it's an infant and a hospital, the exceptions you gave.
Okay, no, let me clarify. First of all, there's other options to terminating a parent's rights, where the child can still have a permanent, forever loving home. There's guardianships, there's other ways to do it so that the legal rights of the parent to the child and the child to the parent isn't forever severed. So, and I also think that in a lot of cases, kids who are removed from parents will be placed with relatives, right? I'm gonna pick on you. Mm-hmm. You get involved in meth, you're using meth, you live with your mom and dad, you get knocked up, you have a kid, right? Where's your kid gonna go? Probably your mom and dad is gonna say, well, we'll take him. CFS is involved. CFS is say, okay, clock's running, go get treatment, show that you can be a good mom, and 15 months goes on, and you have a couple good months, and then you hook up with some old friend and start using meth again. Meanwhile, your kid is at your mom and dad's house, grandparents' house, right? That situation, which is very prevalent, I don't think the state needs to come in and terminate her rights. I think that's going to create so many more family problems long term, because if she does clean up and gets clean and sober and gets rid of all her bad friends and stays clean and sober, who's she going to live with, right? I mean, in most families, right? They're not going to throw it on the street. Or if she goes to a 1-year treatment program and gets out, where's she going to go? Of course, Emily knows the case that I'm referring to, but this is not that uncommon. There's a lot of situations where kids are placed with their family members.
I'm a little bit confused though. So you terminate the mother's rights or the parent's rights, and then they get all cleaned up. Why can't they still come back and live with?
Excellent question.
The grandparents.
Well, excellent question.
Or for parents.
My experience has been that the CFS will still be involved after the parents' rights are terminated for up to a year or two, because they are part of the adoption process. And if the adopting grandparents want to get adoption subsidies and other support from CFS, CFS remains involved. And then they have this whole separate sort of what's called a licensing department. And the licensing department has certain criteria for those parents, grandparents to adopt. And one of them may be you can't have the terminated parent living in your home. I mean, there's so many things that can happen as a result. Termination is so final and creates so many problems long-term for families. I just think it's an unnecessary tool in most situations. So when I say...
If you actually put a guardianship in place, you could remove the legal right of the parent to direct the impaired parent to direct anything that legally related to that child. So Right. So the guardian would have the ultimate decision about education, medical, who the kid gets to be with, who babysits, whatever, right? The guardian would have all those. And I'll tell you, just as again now a cultural discussion, and we can maybe talk a little bit more about different cultures and the way they deal with bad parents, right? Parents that aren't being good parents. They're not raising their kids right, you know, whatever. They're abusing, they're neglecting, they're ignoring, they're abandoning, whatever they're doing. You look at the black culture, right? And you look at Native American culture. And, you know, if there's something going on with the parent, they're in prison, right? They're on a drunken whatever. They left the state to go to North Dakota and work in the oil fields for a year, right? They just go live with relatives. And it's not culturally, that's not considered
bad parenting. It's like, oh, the parents can't parent right now. So you live with, how many black kids I know and how many Native American kids I know have 5 aunties, you know, and 3 grandmothers. And that's a cultural thing. That's family. They raise their kids. The parent can't be available for whatever reason, but we operate on a white middle-class value system in these child welfare cases. And the decisions about what's in their best interests, the decisions about what is a risk, the decision about whether to terminate are made by white middle-class values. And it's important to keep that in mind because different cultures, different families have different definitions of what is family, right? So that's a sort of a long answer to your question, and I'm not sure I really answered your question, but I'm going to back up a little bit to answer it. And you're going to get this from Matt on Wednesday, but there's a process where they file certain paperwork, and then certain things have to happen between this point and this point, and then something else happens at this point, and then right? And so we kind of do this thing for about 15 months, and he'll explain all that. I don't want to get into the legal jargon. But during that period of time, while CFS is working with the parent on their treatment plan, right, the tasks they need to complete to remedy the situation that led to CFS getting involved with to begin with, right, CFS pays for almost everything. We have discussions and debates. They say they won't pay for treatment, right, and so usually the parent has to figure out some way, which they usually get through the criminal justice system, right, they get caught using drugs, and then they end up going to some inpatient treatment. It's generally covered by Department of Corrections, which is our state correctional umbrella. Sometimes they have Medicaid that pays for it. Sometimes I get sneaky, and I say, well, they're going to go see this therapist, but this therapist is also a licensed addiction counselor, and so you'll pay for the therapist, right? But then the parent can still get the benefit of having some addiction treatment. Now, there are so many areas in this field with working with kids that if we could all be experts on all of them, we could solve all the problems of the world. Every one of you is going to have a different thing, I think, that's going to be you're either going to be a domestic violence guru, or you're going to be a mental health guru, or you're going to be substance abuse, addiction person. You know, you're going to know a lot about something, but you're not going to know everything about everything. But it's important to know a little bit about all these areas because, for example, mental health, okay? That's a big word. But one of the most undiagnosed mental health illnesses for anybody, not just this population that we deal with sometimes, is depression. And depression isn't just, oh, you know, I'm so bluesy today, I don't want to get out of bed. It's a chemical thing going on in your brain where you have no initiative, right? Your executive functioning skills aren't allowing you to exercise judgment, make appropriate decisions. I mean, so you can get involved with a parent that you're like watching them and you're going, why don't they care? How come they're missing visits? Why didn't they go to that appointment last week? For God's sakes, Lisa said she'd drive them there. I always offer to drive them, drive CFS crazy. But anyway, you know, you may sit there and go, well, they may have an untreated mental health illness. It's not necessarily them willfully, you know, not being in compliance. It could have to do with the total lack of initiative, total lack of decision-making ability, can't get out of bed. You combine that with low self-esteem, you know, maybe lower back pain. I mean, you have to really get to understand why are these people acting this way. Nobody wakes up in the morning and wants to be a bad parent. Nobody, right? Yeah.
Another question about something.
Sure.
So I'm always curious about long-term success of a family and how well those learned skills get carried on. And so when treatment ends, so to speak, when the case is over and they've had a year, 15 months of treatment, and all of a sudden they're good to go, they're going to relapse at some point. If they have depression, that has probably been a 3-year-long battle, 5, 10 year, maybe since adolescence. And so how do they continue to get some kind of care if it's not paid for and they're impoverished? Like you said, all these families are. So at some point, they're just going to recycle back into the system.
That's exactly what happened.
Not funny.
I mean, on some level, that is what happens. You'll see, there's some CFS workers who are seeing 2nd and 3rd generation kids coming in because they've been in the office for so long. our goal, my goal, I hope your goal, is to try to figure out a way to break this cycle, to get in now with these parents right now and figure out what can we do different so their kids don't grow up and have kids that have to be removed. I mean, that's to me the bigger vision going on here. It's not just holding parents accountable and finding homes for their children. I mean, to me, the issues are much broader in terms of a society and all of us living together. But there is a positive side to your question. Oftentimes, the intervention that goes on, if there's a good lawyer and a good CASA and, you know, good this and a good that, and people really get hooked up with services and are really given an opportunity to change, that change can resonate and they can become successful long term. So that's one answer. And then the second answer is that one of the goals of CFS, or at least good CFS workers, is to try to set up services for a family. And when I say services, I mean therapy, counseling, something called FBS, family-based services, counselors and therapists that come in a home and work with stress, coping with stress, you know, how to deal with kids. And as soon as you learn one thing, for any of us who have kids, of course, then they turn to the next stage and then there's all these new problems we don't know how to deal with, right? So we have a county health department. They have social workers and nurses that go into families and will stay with them till the kids are 18. We have a lot of success using that resource. The idea is to hook the family up with as many resources. And Medicaid does kick in an awful lot if the kids are in the home after CFS is out of their life. So Medicaid will often continue to pay for therapy for the children, right? The other sort of little legal buzzword is when you're making decisions about should this kid be in the home or not be in the home, and is what kind of protective capacity does the kid have? Right? You may make a different decision about whether to leave a 2-year-old in a home rather than a 10-year-old if the mom's using drugs, because the 10-year-old is sick of it, right? And would have no problem saying to a teacher or calling you, God dang it, my mom is stoned again and laying on the couch and I'm hungry, right? I mean, protective capacity. They would have the ability to protect themselves by reaching out, making a phone call, knocking on a neighbor's door. Clearly, a 2-year-old wouldn't know what to do if the parent was unavailable to parent. So you're making different decisions also depending upon the age of kids. Same set of facts, you may make a different decision, right? So was that the last of what you were talking about? Okay. And then was that, did you finish follow-up?
Well, yeah, I get maybe too hung up on these definitions we're dealing with, but we got to base it on something. And what I'm kind of struggling with is the best interest says safe home. But the minimum sufficient level of care has physical, emotional, and developmental needs, which to me implies more than just safety. It's some level of enrichment and developmental progress, emotional. So it's not safe, just doesn't quite capture it for me, and maybe that's what you're saying.
So emotional and psychological abuse is when, and I'm just going to do practical examples and then we can talk about if you agree or disagree or can think of other examples. Every time the kid talks, the parent says, shut up, you little fag. Quit your crying, you little baby, right? Get out of here, I'm watching TV. Get the fuck in your room. Shut up or I'll whack you, okay? That's abusive, okay? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that kid should be removed. It means that parent needs to learn how to be a parent. They're probably disciplining their kid the same way they were disciplined. I mean, I'm sure, and that's part of breaking these cycles. The question about whether or not it's emotionally safe for that kid to remain in the house is the question, right? So in that case, let's say the boy, let's say it's a 12-year-old boy, and the father's been talking to him like this for years and continues to, and I represent dad. You may, as a CASA, say, we got to get that kid out of here. That is emotional abuse. This kid's going to be traumatized. We need to get him out of this house, right? And I might say, he's 12. He's been dealing with this his whole life. Let's get services into this home, right? Let's get some therapy for this kid, therapy for dad. Let's send dad to parenting classes. Let's have dad figure out that this is not the way you have to talk to your kid. Not only are you showing no respect, but you're not experiencing any joy. We want parents to enjoy being with their kids. It's important to kids, okay? Now, if the kid's 3, right? I mean, then of course what I'm going to say next is obvious, and I still, as the dad's attorney, may be fighting to have the kid in the home, but you would certainly be within a reason, being a reasonable person would say, well, I don't think that 3-year-old should have to put up with that. And then he's too young, he doesn't get it, he can't fight back, whatever. So that's what I'm saying, each case is so different. So these sweeping generalizations, psychological abuse and emotional abuse, you're going to have to figure out what does that mean, right? In terms of making a kid unsafe. And how do you make that decision? Is it their age? Is it the way they're acting out? I mean, some kids grow up in homes where, I know a lot of Italian families in Chicago, they're smacking their kids left and right, and those kids are honor students and whatever. I mean, and that doesn't make it right. I'm not saying that makes it right. Please, I hope nobody thinks I'm saying that. I'm just saying that that's a situation where maybe the kid could remain in the home and the whole family could learn some better ways to interact.
Yeah, I think it's about looking at the bigger picture too. If dad treats mom like that, and it's a pattern of abusive behavior, then I would ask myself, no matter if that kid is 3 or 12, is that a safe environment for mom, for kid, for everybody to be around? And then is that really something that anger management classes and therapy can fix?
Right. Or should dad leave? Mom and the kids stay there and dad leave until he finishes 40 hours of anger management. I mean, that's why I'm saying each situation, there's ways to creatively problem solve that long term works best towards trying to keep family preservation, trying to keep the family together. So you don't need to make these black and white decisions and remove kids. And then my experience, although it's changing, has been that, they remove a kid, cloister them somewhere, protect them, take care of them, make them safe, make them happy, right? Which doesn't sound bad, but that's what they do. And then tell the parents that they have to be an A+ parent before they can get their kid back. And I'm trying to get everybody to say they have to be a D or a C- to get their kid back. And that doesn't go over well with people. And I can see all of you.
Make it a C+.
But see, that's for you to sort of figure out. You have to figure out what you think is going to make sense for you to go to sleep at night, right?
Isn't a big part of this is talking to the child, I think, is going to, that's what I'm hearing as you're speaking. I'm like, some of the stuff you should be able to draw from the child if they're able to speak to you.
So what CFS will say, whenever I use the argument, but the 2-year-old loves his mom. Look when she shows up at the visits, he runs to her, he wants to go home. Look at the 8-year-old, he cries every night at Watson's, he wants to go home, he loves his mom. Every time I bring up the argument, they love their mom, they love their dad, they want to go home, they want to go home. I'm then hit with the counter argument that all kids want to go home, they don't know what's in their best interests.
No, I think it can be more traumatizing at times for a child to, for us, I can't only speak for myself, like having grown up in a healthy home, both with mom and dad, regular family, and very permanent, I think, again, kind of speaking to those standards, we all have different standards of hygiene and cleanliness and, what a family unit is supposed to look like. And I think maybe then it's hard for us to it's easy to say, like you were saying earlier, Lisa, couldn't we just get him into a better home? Is my kid going to have a better future with this very stable, healthy foster family? When at the same time, I think, oftentimes it can be a lot more permanent and consistent and stable, and for the child, definitely less traumatizing to be with a family that's, not perfect. That's in this picture here.
There's studies and studies and studies done that the disruption of a child being removed is so traumatic that, to me, that decision must be weighed and made much more carefully than it's made. The other thing, and this is because you're a bright crowd, I can tell you're a smart group here, the issue isn't always whether or not there was an emergency to remove the kid. Often I have no objection to that. It's 2 o'clock in the morning and the parent gets arrested and there's no one else around, and so CFS takes the kid. I'm not going to fight over stuff like that. But you can return them. What happens, they take them and then they don't return them until the parent does X, Y, Z, right? So I often fight in that in-between area of, okay, I understand why you took the kid, now bring him home and let's get some services into this family. But once they take him, boy, trying to get him home is it's this uphill battle. It really is, from a parent's perspective and from a child's perspective. Did someone else have something? Me. Okay.
And maybe you're not the right person to answer this.
Oh, I'll probably try anyway.
From a long-term psychological perspective, there's been a lot of studies about, of course, you know, the trauma of taking a child away from their family. But there's what kind of, I represented a lot of people that had been abused by priests, so I know more about physical child abuse, right? And the fact that children that are abused early tend to abuse on other children to get their power. You are raised with an alcoholic parent, you're more likely to be an alcoholic and have those coping skills. Emotionally abused, right? So what kind of studies have been done to talk about those impacts? Yes, there's trauma of taking the family away, but if the family member is creating this other issue, how do you balance that off? I mean, how do you balance?
I can spend hours talking about that, but I guess my immediate response, so I don't bore you to death, is that if you talk to very progressive therapists, they will tell you that kids and parents do not operate independently in a family unit, that we're dealing with the family system. And so if dad's an alcoholic, or if dad's a sex offender, or if dad physically beats his kid, that kid is learning those behaviors and, like you're saying, is going to grow up and repeat them. But maybe not. Or do something else. Have some other pathology as a result of that trauma. Okay, I get that. But what progressive therapists have explained to me, and there's studies out there, and I should probably get studies before I just sit here and talk out my butt, but the idea is that you work with the family system that's intact right now, and you deal with the alcoholism or you deal with the physical violence as a system. Now, you may not cure dad, right, or whoever the offending parent is. You may not, they may be too old, they may have, you know, certain behaviors. You may not be able to arrest that behavior. But in the kid being involved in the therapy, the kid is then going to learn how to make different choices, deal with some of the grief and loss issues that they're going to have to deal with in terms of whatever respect they have for a parent. I mean, families are systems. They're not independent little units. So when you remove them, now I'm going to give therapy to the kid, and now I'm going to give therapy to mom, and now, you know, everybody's doing all their stuff over here. You're ignoring the fact that either they have these symbiotic ties, right, that existed before the removal, and probably will all somehow get back together somehow, no matter what CFS does. And that's another study, which I think is pretty clear. And again, you can ask Sheila if she has the figures. I'm sure they do. But I think like 80 or 90% of the kids who were removed or whose parents' rights have been terminated all go and find their parents when they're 18. So why are we ignoring that? I mean, CFS always says that to me, like, well, they're just going to go find their parents when they're 18 anyway, so what's the big deal? What's the difference if we terminate? I'm like, if you know that, why aren't we working with the family?
It's a little different than sticking with a horrible situation when you're 3.
And that's an excellent point. And so that would be CFS's response. They would say, well, at least we got to protect them and they got to have a childhood. And that's not a bad argument. And I'm not saying every case across the board I want kids to stay with bad families. I'm just saying that the tendency to separate kids from their family, I think, is greater than the need. And that a lot more money and time could be spent on working with the family system. Here's what I feel about sex abuse, if I can understand why you're asking that question in terms of whether kids should remain in the home or not remain in the home. I think there's an immediate physical threat to a child remaining with a parent who has sexually offended and therefore needs to be removed from that immediate physical threat. I think there's an emergency, and I support kids being removed in emergency situations. Most people would then take that a step further and say the kids shouldn't have visits with the perpetrator or the sex offender. I deviate there. And again, my attitudes are more, you can say crazy, I say progressive. I think that from the therapists I've talked to and the research I've done, that kids should be involved in some sort of a therapy with the sex offender if the kid wants to. Okay? And I say that because, again, people are always substituting their own judgment for what they think is best for kids. And I think kids, even age 5 or 6, they know if they're afraid of somebody. If they're not afraid of them, it's going to behoove that kid to sit in a room and process through their feelings of anger, humiliation. Sometimes they like the sex abuse. That even complicates things more. If they've enjoyed it, they felt special, they felt loved, right? So it's such a complicated issue. And to make these lines, let's get this kid away from this offender, and let's never have the kid have to see this person again, because it's so traumatizing, right? I don't think that is a wise or creative way to deal with the complicated issues involved in sex abuse. Does that answer the question? Okay, a couple people talked to me on break and reminded me of some things. Good question was, what happens when the kid's the problem and not the parent? And you'll find this in a lot of cases with obviously teenagers or preteens or even younger kids, but you'll see this where the parents can't handle the behavior. A lot of different things can happen in those situations. The kids could be sort of tracked into youth court, which is they treat them more like young criminals rather than abused and neglected. Pretty fine line though, and I'll give you a funny example. In Chicago, we had one big courthouse that was all juvenile cases. And when you came in the front door, you go to the left, it was the delinquency cases, those were all the kids in trouble, and you go to the right, and it was all the abused and neglected kids that were taken from their parents, okay? And in the center, down the whole long way, because there's like 5 courtrooms on each side, is sort of the big massive waiting area, like an airport lounge, just chairs and tables, and everybody, you know, everybody knew everybody on both sides. The one in trouble was the one who offended against the kid who was removed because the parent used to beat him, and you know, it was there's a pretty fine line between kids that get in trouble in a delinquent or youth court and the kids are being removed because of abuse or neglect later on. Okay, so it's a lot of the same population again, I guess I would say. So I don't know if that really answers your questions, but CFS is supposed to be trained to recognize when a parent is doing the best they can, and that the kid is really, and we've had cases where maybe the parent isn't doing the best they can, but CFS still recognizes that the kid is being manipulative or what they call triangulating. The kid will kind of use the CFS worker and the parent and maybe their lawyer. I get used all the time to sort of be part of this triangulation of, you know, the way kids do with their parents, right? Who's ever had experience with the kids pit mom and dad against each other? Ah, yeah, you have. But you said you had kids, right? Have you ever had that situation where they may try something on you, it doesn't work, and then they go and try it on? Oh, absolutely. And then dad didn't know that they already tried it on you, so dad gives a different answer, right? So that's called triangulation. And so that's what kids in these situations will do with the CFS worker and the therapist and the lawyer, and you know. So I don't know if that really addresses the answer, but I mean, those happen often. The kids you're going to be most involved with are going to be little kids that don't have a lot of protective capacity and are in some danger. I mean, most of the time. Is there another question? No? Okay. Here's the toughest cases. You will often find marginal parents. And when I say marginal, I mean they're struggling. These are people who, you know, can't always get up at the same time every morning, can't keep a job, have issues getting in the way of being successful. That's what I would call a marginal parent or marginal individual. We might have all gone through stages like that in our lives, but for the most part, we can rally and function. I mean, you're here, you're at a meeting, you're consistently at a training. There's some people that really cannot do that. They can't get dressed and be somewhere and function and do okay. So that's what I call marginal parent. Sometimes they have pretty normal kids. And you can do stuff with a family like that, I think. You've got great kids, marginal parent, get some services to the parents so they can be better, right?
Is that an official term or is that your term?
The which one?
The marginal parent term.
I think I stole that from a therapist. That we're dealing with a marginalized section of society that most people aren't generally familiar with and don't generally socialize with or hang out with, or, you know, your kids don't always go to school with their kids, or they don't know about what's going on in the kids' home life oftentimes. So marginalized in that they're not always part of what we would consider mainstream culture. I guess that's what I refer to. What was I going to say? Oh, the toughest cases and probably the highest majority of cases that makes these emotional and makes them complicated and makes them challenging is when you have a marginal parent and a high needs kid, right? So you've got a kid would be a handful for even a functioning parent because of whatever reason, physical disability, developmental delay, you know, whatever their issues are, they may have their own issues. And then you've got this marginal parent who can barely take care of themselves. And that's the cases, you know, they're tough, they're just tough. And those are the cases where it's really easy to write off the parent because you want to focus on getting the kid treatment and help and services, right? And so but you've got to think of that, my opinion, think of that as a family unit. Two other things I want to say, and then I want Emily to have some time to talk because I know I want to say more after Emily talks. But I have been to several conferences, whatever they're called, where oftentimes they'll have foster kids who've aged out of the system, not necessarily Montana, but wherever, sit on a panel and just take questions from the audience, which is usually a collection of therapists and lawyers and social work CASAs, right? And what I have taken away from seeing these foster kids on the panels, at least a very pervasive theme, when they've asked, you know, how the experience could have been better for them being part of the foster care system or being a ward of the state or however you want to describe it, almost across the board, they said they wish they'd had a better lawyer and they wish they would have been able to talk to the judge and say what they want, and they wish that everybody hadn't decided what was best for them. They wanted to be heard. Right? So when I represent kids, that's what I do. And I often do it in the face of a lot of controversy because people are like, why are you doing this, right? This is bad for this kid. I do it because I think they need to have a voice. And I don't substitute my judgment. I have no idea what's best for kids. I think if I knew that, I'd write a book. What happens usually is the kid will say to me, not 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, why can't I call my mom at night? Why can't I tell my dad I love him every night? Why can't I see my sister on Saturday? Well, CFS doesn't think it's in your best interest because your mom's using methamphetamines right now. And I've had kids say to me, because they're so experienced in the drug culture, because they've been raised around it, well, can't they just test her urine and make sure she's clean so I can see her? Can't they just do this so that I can see my mom? Can't they just do that so I can call her at night? Or I'll say she's in jail and she doesn't have money. And you're living with your grandma now, and she won't accept the collect call. So I don't know how to get you to talk to your mom every night. And she'll say, well, can you figure something out? So I go try to figure something out. CFS says it's not in the kid's best interest to talk to the mom at night because she's in the jail, and then she has nightmares and stresses out about, you know, her mom's in orange and when she's going to get out. And what I say, this kid wants to talk to their mom, wants to hear her voice, wants to know she's okay, wants to tell her about her day. And I will fight to make that happen. I don't care who says it's not in the kid's best interest. So that's more the reality of what I'm doing. I'm not going to, and CFS always says this, oh, what are you going to do, Lisa? The kid wants 50 donuts. You're going to go tell the judge, my client wants 50 donuts, right? Well, I mean, I still have an ethical responsibility to counsel my clients, whether they're 5 or 15 or 40. And I'm always counseling my clients, no matter what their age, on what I think is in their best interests. That's part of my job. But I will not substitute my judgment for like a kid's heart like that. Situation, kid wants to get knocked up because that's going to be the way out, right? Right. I will do everything I can to talk them out of that decision. And the only way I'm going to be successful in doing that is if they trust me. And the only way they're going to trust me is if I'm advocating for what they want. The better example, right, which is a trickier thing to decide what to do, I got a 16-year-old whose mom abandoned her. She's being moved around foster homes. None of them are working because she's got issues. Her mom abandoned her and left the state, and she's all alone. She's acting out, and so she's a challenge. So she's not working. She's working her way towards being put into a group home because she can't be successful in the family, okay? But she did nothing wrong at all. Her mom just simply said, I'm done, and left the state and left her here, okay? She wants me to get her emancipated. Okay, she's 16. Now, in order for a 16-year-old to be emancipated, there's certain criteria you have to meet in the statute, right? They have to have a job, they have to have a bank account, they have to be able to show the judge, you know, they can live on their own. There's rules. Her therapist, her CFS worker, her high school counseling team, I mean, they were so mad at me for even letting her think that this was an option. right? Because I was playing into her 16-year-old craziness, and she could never be giving her the idea that this was an option, right? They felt as the grown-ups, as in a lot of family homes, the grown-ups have made a decision. You're 16, you're not getting emancipated. This is in your best interest. We're not talking about it. I mean, that's what I'm talking about when I say the kids want a voice, and they want somebody who's going to listen to them and advocate for them.
You know, here's the thing about this work, is that I rarely feel more convicted than about 60-40 on any given issue, because they're so incredibly complicated and there's so many perspectives to every situation, and there's always good arguments on both sides, and I find myself grappling with that much more often than who's doing this right and who's doing this wrong. It's more about, what do I think? So no, I can't think of a situation where I was vehemently opposed to something that CFS did.
Well, not vehemently opposed, but disagreed with their conclusions, that it was in a child's best interest to go down path A rather than path B.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think in the case that you're alluding to, which was a toddler whose mother had a really terrible drug addiction, and when she was sober demonstrated excellent, off the chart, oh, she's a better mom than I am, when she was sober, but then when she went off the wagon, she went so far bad wrong off the wagon.
Like MIA for weeks, leaving her kid with
like
grandma.
Other scary addicts in the community were telling professionals, we're really scared about her. Like that, like addicts were alarmed by her behavior. So it was not good. And the CFS really wanted to just terminate the mom's rights, and I didn't. I thought that I wanted her rights to stay intact and get while she had a shot at long-term treatment. But again, that was a situation, and I testified on the witness stand that that's what I thought should happen, and I didn't feel, I still felt like there were very strong arguments on the other side.
You know, it was really something to see Emily on the witness stand when, because the Matt went after it and was going, because they were going for termination, and he was saying, how many chances do we give this mom? How many times are you going to give this mom another chance? And Emily went, you know, this is, you know, she said, I want to give this child another chance. It's not about giving the mom another chance. It's, I want to give this child another chance.
She said the child had a right to a sober mom. The child had the right to wait for her mom to be sober because they had such a good relationship. She focused on the kid. I represented the kid in that case, but I sat at the table with the mom and the dad who were being terminated. I mean, it was a big mess. But
most of the time, I agree with Lisa's philosophy, which is surprising to me because when I became a CASA, I was horrified by some of the child abuse cases that were in the news at the time, and that's what moved me. I actually called around to nonprofit organizations and said, I want to do work toward child abuse prevention, and you can't. It's really hard, and it's probably because of confidentiality. But anyways, so that's how I ended up being a CASA, and I imagined myself fighting for kids, and it would be me fighting against their parents. That's kind of how I imagined it. And I imagined these nasty homes and situations, and I would be rescuing the child. That's kind of how I framed it in my mind. Maybe not necessarily consciously or that black and white, but that's definitely how I felt about it. But I think I've been doing it for 3 years. And as the time goes by, what I'm realizing more and more is that these children have been through these experiences, and you cannot unring that bell. You cannot deal them a new hand. The best you can hope to do is teach them how to play the hand that they were dealt. as effectively as possible. And I feel like the system is trying to unring the bell, trying to deal them a new hand. And that is just not what happens.
Wow, I don't need to say anything else. I pretty much said it all. Yeah, that's exactly what I try to say. I just say it in much more, whatever.
Along those lines.
Yeah. Acronymous, is that the word?
At one point you said, you delineated pretty well, there are cases where you're going, like sex abuse or whatever, where it's abandonment, gone for, or in jail for 40 years, whatever. But then you, except for those types of cases, you would say like termination, really, you see it as unnecessary. My question is, when, I know Brian is staying kind of focused on, safe home, permanent home, as quickly as possible. That's kind of our mantra. And what if, like, even in the case that you were talking about, and the other one you had too, is if the child, if they don't terminate, if the child is thinking, this is my mom, and I'm going to go see my mom at my grandma's place, or I'm going to, she's going to be in my life, she's going to be out of my life. She's real close to me for 2 months, and then she's gone for 6 months. And from this age on, or baby on, how traumatic is that? I mean, to have this parent figure in and out. I'm not going to healthy in and out, but it's like they're in, they try to connect, and this is where, the rad thing comes in, where kids are attaching, they attach, then gone, attach, gone.
Rad.
So reactive attachment.
Reactive attachment.
Yeah, that was on my list. I forgot to circle back to that after the lobotomies. That's on my lobotomy section.
At what point, I understand, like Emily, I really, I see what you're saying, and it makes a whole lot of sense. But the hard part, I think, for CASAs is, at what point do we say enough? And how much damage is done, and at one point do we say no more? It's a tough, that's a tough call, like you're suggesting, but.
So the speaker you need to get to answer that question, because he's answered it to me so eloquently and wonderfully, although he didn't do so well on the stand, is Andy Lau. And he's a psychologist here in town, Andy, L-A-U-E. And he talks about the studies and the research, this symbiotic tie that happens with blood, with birth parents and birth kids, the smells, the touches, all those millions of things that are going on those first several years, the things you can't measure, the things that you can't touch that create this bond or this attachment. And removing the child from that relationship and artificially saying it's over, the damage and the trauma to the child's emotional, psychological, and cognitive development is so great that every attempt should be made to preserve that relationship. And they're just going to look different than, like I said, our white middle class values a lot of times, Maybe mom is going to be the mom who drinks, and she's here, and she's on a drinking rampage. And that's part of the way the child comes to understand not only the parent, but themselves. You sever the parent from the child's existence. You've basically cut off or severed part of that kid's being that doesn't make sense anymore. And I think that the long-term effects of the separation and the disruption are far greater than any suffering of abuse and neglect in the home, unless it's extreme. I say all the time, then those aren't most of the cases you're going to be working with. You're going to be working mostly with that marginal parent, poverty, can't get to an appointment, can't keep food in the house, uses drugs, has untreated depression, right? probably has some pain from some back injury or some concussion that they never got treated. I mean, they're just people. And then they have kids. And we can't take kids away from all these people that are...
Looking at all those issues too, poverty is
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it is huge. I'm glad you have a whole night.
The Barb Counts coming in.
So when I was talking about lobotomies before, and then I talked about ADHD and the overdiagnosis and the overtreatment, you know, then sort of the new du jour is what's called attachment issues. And I shouldn't say that as if I'm minimizing or trivializing this concept, because it's important and it's traumatic and I think it should be understood. It's the overuse of it and then what parents have to do because of it. So they've begun diagnosing kids, and actually this is starting to burn out a little bit too since the time I've been involved. But for the first 8 years, every kid was being diagnosed with RAD, R-A-D, reactive attachment disorder. That somehow their early bonding with a caretaker was so disorganized, right, that they've developed this insecure way to attach. And that as a result of that, they have all these problems that stem from it, right? So, you know, you ever go to a party or a friend's house or something, or any situation, and some kid you don't even know, like, runs up and hugs you and kisses you, right? So that's considered sort of a red flag that they have attachment issues because they're too willing and quick to attach to a parent or an adult that they don't know because they have an insecure attachment issue because they have a disordered early attachment relationships. Okay, so I mean, we could talk for hours about this, and I think you are a couple nights from now, but anyway, the point is, it's like every kid was like, rad, this kid's rad, this kid's rad. Well, what they say then, if they get that diagnosis, is the kid has to be removed from the parent, and they have to be put into a situation where they can develop a trusting, safe, healthy attachment with a trusting, safe adult, which usually means a group home, and then once they develop those trust issues and relearn how to be in relationship, then they can be reintroduced to the caretaker that failed them, right? I mean, this is sort of the general thinking. Well, I mean, it drives me nuts. I hate this stuff because I think the human condition is so fragile anyway. I think parenting is really tough. And I think that any psychological theory that perpetuates removing kids from a parent in order to fix them and make them better and do something with the kid is experimental junk science. Just understand that there's different views. I guess that's my point. I'm not trying to tell you have to think like I think. I mean, of course, I think everyone should, but I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you to think, because psychological theories come in and out to explain human behavior. Different providers are trained in different things. Everybody's got biases. I mean, a lot of people who go into psychology and therapy go into it because there's something wrong that happened in their life they're trying to figure out, right? I mean, just understand, we're just people. No one therapist or CFS worker or lawyer, except me, of course, has the answer to everything. I mean, these are really tricky cases. Kids are complicated. Parenting is really, it's not only a complicated and challenging thing and hard to be a parent, but it is so filled with self-doubt and anxiety that everything you're doing is wrong and that someone's judging you and that everybody else's kids are better than yours. This would be a good time, I don't know how much time we have, to talk a little bit about lawyers and treatment of CASAs and lawyers and CASAs together, that kind of stuff, and testimony.
They all love each other.
Testifying.
Testimony, I think I've had questions on that in the past.
No way, I did not come with an agenda, so, yeah.
We talk a little about testifying.
So before I do that, because I never do what anybody tells me to do right away, I want to talk about adversity and confrontation. I have evolved a bit over the years and have tried to become, you know, a better listener and a kinder person and, you know, try to take in everything. I mean, I go into every treatment meeting where there's like 8 people, and I go in with this mantra of, okay, just keep your mouth shut, just try to be a good listener, don't jump in and tell everybody they're wrong, and I usually last about 10 minutes, and then I can't, I'm like, you know, I can't do it anymore. So I get very passionate about this stuff. But I will say there's an effort to try to make these cases very collaborative, which is everybody's supposed to sit down and peacefully try to work out what's best for the family or for the children, okay? I think that's a fiction that I have tried to play in, and so you will find that this can be adversarial. And when I say adversarial, I mean whether you're in court or whether you're in a meeting, you may find that people have very definite opinions, and attorneys being attorneys can often be much more assertive about their definite opinions. And so I've talked to CASAs over the years who felt like I attacked them, or I attacked their opinion, or I made them feel bad, or made them feel like they were wrong, okay? You're going to have to figure out a way to get over that. Because if you say to me, I don't think this kid should go home, I'm going to look at you and say, why not? I'm not attacking who you are. I want to know, why do you have that opinion? What is it based on? And I'll tell you something, Emily and I have had many discussions where I have tried to change her mind. Emily, God dang it, listen to me. This is how this should go, and this is why, and the kid's going to be better off. And she's like, she listens. She has this like Emily way of just, and then she'll ask some follow-up question like, well, what about the fact that, you know, Mom was shooting meth yesterday? Well, that's not the point. I'm talking about, so, you know, so she has a way, she listens, she processes, she asks me follow-up questions, and then she does whatever she wants. That's exactly what you have to do. You don't have to fight with me or any lawyer. You don't have to just be, you know, confident in whatever your opinions are. Or say, I've had CASAs, although I don't usually like this, but they'll say, I don't have an opinion at this time. I'm still collecting information. You know, don't put me on the spot, whatever. But don't take it personally, ever, 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 ever. This is a really emotional field, and passions can run high. We're talking about kids and families and parents, and everybody's got an idea about what's best. So please don't ever take it personally. And I'll make you a promise. If any one of you start working and get a case and you want to ask me any questions, you ask me anytime. And I'll probably, I mean, I will always talk to you whenever you want to. If you're having a problem with another attorney or even a CFS worker and you just want to sort of problem solve it, I know you have Dennis to do that with. I think you also have Kirsten to do that with, right? And but if you want to bend my ear at any time, I have no problem doing that. But just accept the fact I'm abrupt, I'm abrasive, and I'm opinionated, and that's just who I am, and I'm not the only one out there. So it's not personal. It's not about you.
I'd like
Thanks
to,
for the heads up.
I have some stuff to say about that too, but I see some hands up too. So just let the record show I have some stuff to say about what you just said.
Okay, good. Do it.
Talk.
Yeah.
Because you only have half hour.
Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So just to kind of build on what Lisa just said, I don't mean this to be offensive to you attorneys in the room, but in my experience, attorneys generally have a personality type in which they are more comfortable with confrontation than people who don't tend to be attorneys. I mean, that's just how they operate, it's how they communicate, and I've even had it explained to me that it's important for them to be able to do that because it enables them to develop a better understanding of the other side. It helps them to identify the holes in their own case, and it also kind of helps them blow off some steam that they don't get many opportunities to do. And so we just need to accept that you're stepping into a different world now. There's going to be confrontation. There's going to be times when it is extremely uncomfortable. Like the first meeting I went to was a family decision-making meeting as a CASA, and oh my God, I have never been involved in anything like that. They were angry and yelling at each other, and at one point the mom completely blew up, just screaming and F-bombs, picks up her chair, storms over into the corner and sits in it, like facing into the corner, like a pouting toddler. And in the meantime, the dad passed out. He shot up something. They were both homeless, covered with scabs and filthy dirt. I mean, it was just like, holy crap. You've come into this, it's just a different universe, and you just have to accept that and remember that it's not personal, and you're just operating in this new set of social norms, and you're going to be fine. You just take a deep breath. It's not about you. You just listen. You feel your heart rate increasing. You feel your palms getting sweaty, and you just acknowledge that, and let it go. And keep your wits about you and your ears open. So,
one thing just to add to that is that you may have 1 or 2 cases, maybe 3, I don't know. I think most of you, generally, don't they just take like 1 or 2 or 3 at a time and then?
One, we try to hold it one.
Oh, well, till it's over and then do another, oh, okay, well, okay. Some of the public defenders that represent these parents have 150. Okay, and each one is as demanding and requires attention as the other. And they're in court all day, in meetings all day, every day. And then they come back to their office and they have, and I'm not inventing these numbers, 250 emails from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And then they have to try to answer all those, and then the phone calls. And the phone calls aren't just with the client. These cases involve therapists and visitation supervisors and CASAs and people taking UAs and probation officers. And, you can have 20 people on a file that you have to call every week for various reasons. So when they go to a meeting, it's like, all right, let's get through it, right? And so this may be your only meeting of the month or something, and you come in, you get your coffee, and, and we're just like powering through it because we've got 4 more that day or something, right? So just not about you. I just wanted to emphasize that. Oh, I know another thing that's come up in the past. A lot of CASA will sit in the courtroom sometimes and watch, and they'll be sitting back there. I think Dennis is the one who told me about this, and they'll be watching me or another lawyer do something or say something, and they'll be going, what are they doing, or why are they saying that, or something along those lines. Come up and ask me. Just ask me. I mean, I'll tell you why I said that, or what I'm trying to do, or if I'm responding to something maybe, or maybe I'm doing a preemptive strike, right, of something that came up in some other meeting, then I'm trying to do something, right? I mean, I'm not just up there making noise. I mean, some of the judges may think so, but I have a purpose to my questions and to my strategy and to what I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah.
We were talking about this, something I was talking about with somebody, and it was interesting where it's adversary and advocate come from the same root word. Mm-hmm. And so we're advocates, but that implies an adversarial relationship. Mm-hmm. You're advocate for your client, whoever that may be. That's your job. Right. Now, there are people who hate confrontation, and there's people who view it as sport. Right. But, I mean, we're going to have that in what we do. And I remember what Mike Bryan said that first. Mike Bryan. He said, and this really stuck with me, he said, we talked about all this adversarial stuff. He ended it by saying, just remember that everybody really means well and has good intentions in this process. And don't forget that. And that seems to me, that's what you have to attitude. We may disagree. That's okay. We're sort of supposed to.
Right, but some people don't like that. They think that because we're all here, supposedly, all here looking out for what's best for kids, we should be able to sit down and have very informal, constructive, collaborative discussions on what's best for kids. And I think in theory that would be very nice. But, and I try every meeting, but I am getting better. But I'm still representing a parent who feels that their child was wrongly taken, and that the state is in their face and should be gone, and that they've, quote, done everything they need to do, or they're not as bad as the other 5 parents that got their kids back 6 months ago, right? And another thing that's important to understand is most of these people, meaning my clients, parents whose children have been removed, that's the population I'm talking about, they have they have huge trust issues. They have to trust me. If they don't trust me, if I don't have a trusting relationship, then I'm just another cog in the CFS machinery to march their kids off to termination, right? I have to set myself aside. And I do that by advocating for what they want. And I do that for having their back. And then when I get that trust, sometimes it takes a month, sometimes it takes 6 months, I can be much more effective in getting them to comply and do what's best for their kids. But I can't sit next to a CFS worker in the second meeting and be like, I'm done. I have no attorney relationship with them anymore.
So this is like a very lawyer-specific question, but from your perspective as a lawyer, and I'm assuming you've had cases where you had to, as a lawyer, gain their trust and operate in the best interest of your client when you maybe knew that, you know, you were defending or advocating for a dad who had sexually abused his child over the course of so and so many years, and the department was going for termination, and yet here you have to be like still having to advocate, you know, and he would fight the termination. So the lawyer specific question is, you know, how
do you do that? How do you represent those people?
Well, I mean, like everybody has a right to.
Right, okay, let me answer it. I'm going to answer it twofold. One is, as a criminal defense attorney, which I've trained, most of my clients are guilty. In fact, when I have an innocent client, I get much more full of anxiety and fear because I could lose and they're innocent. I don't see myself getting them out of trouble. I see myself as representing a system of fairness and that I'm making sure the state does their job. I'm going to object and do everything I can at every turn to ensure that we live in a free country where the state does not able to abuse their power and simply take people off the streets and charge them with crimes and put them in prison without a fair process. That is my passion, okay? I see the same thing in these cases. These cases are called civil cases. They're called child welfare. To me, this is no different than a criminal action from the parent's perspective. It is the state of Montana, even though you CFS, child welfare, it's the state of Montana prosecuting the parents for abusing or neglecting their children with the possibility that they could lose all their rights to their children 15 months down the road. Okay, so I go and represent these people with the same level of stridency that I do as if they were accused of a crime. I am not defending their specific actions. I am advocating for their rights to have a fair process to make sure that the government doesn't have so much power they can go into any one of your homes and take your children and not give you a fair chance, a fair fighting chance to prove that you can be a better parent than having the kid end up in a foster care system. That's very important to me. And what CFS doesn't understand, because you have a lot of young workers, although they're really up in their bar here. They have a lot more masters and social workers working over there and a lot older people that have done like other jobs and are now coming there. So it's kind of a different breed of workers than when I first started. But whether or not they're experienced or not, they all feel very well-intentioned, maybe on some level morally superior because they're only there to help kids. Whether it's getting back with their families or not getting back, they really feel that they're right. And they forget that they have the power of the state behind them. It is an uneven playing field.
And I certainly agree with everything you just said. I think it's one thing to advocate for a fair process, though, while at the same time, I mean, like, I guess, do you ever, yes, you support, you know, you're advocating for this parent, but do you ever fully advocate for, you know, again, this example, like, dad, there's evidence, there's a criminal case going against him, maybe he's even convicted of that. Do you still advocate for?
She gets sued if she did.
Well, I wouldn't get. I don't think I'd get sued. I would. I'd lose trust.
Right. But could you sit down and have that conversation with him and say,
I do all the time.
You can.
I say you are so screwed. You have no idea how screwed you are. Your kid has said you sexually touched her. Her friend who spent the night said you did this to her. They've been interviewed by these top forensic investigators who all agree this has happened. You really want me to fight this? What do you want me to do for you? What do you think I can do for you? That's mitigation, right? That's the conversation we have. And if they say, well, I just don't want to, whatever, we talk about it. I mean, but I can't have that kind of conversation with the client unless I have their trust. It would be like me sitting down with you right now. So, I hear you've been drinking a little bit lately. It's starting to interfere with your job. You think we need to talk about this? Let's talk about how many beers did you have last night? You know, do you want me to come and sit down with your wife? The three of us maybe could have a chat. I don't even know the guy. What's he going to tell me? Nothing. He's just going to think I'm a nosy whatever. So trust. I have to get my client's trust. And ultimately I can be the best person to talk a parent into relinquishing their rights if that's what's best for their kids, if I have a position of trust. And it's not going to, CFS, I feel sorry for them. I really do, because they want to have a trust relationship with these parents, because they want to truly help them, because they want the kids to be able to go home with them, right? But again, I used this word before, I'll use it again, it's a fiction. You can't have a trusting relationship with the person who has the power to take your kid out of your home and terminate your rights. So it's sort of this dance that they do, you know, like the parents sort of complying and acting like they're friends with the worker, and the worker, you know, but I think it's a fiction. I don't know the answer. I don't know how to change it, but I think it's a problem.
Testifying?
Oh, testifying, okay. There's one judge, and I don't know if he still does it. You might know if Judge Larson does this. Does he still protect CASAs from having to testify, or does he make some testify?
No, he doesn't, he allows them to testify.
Right, okay. I think all four of them do then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you're going to learn how to write a report, do an investigation. You're going to submit this report, and in this report, you're going to say, I talked to Lisa on this day, and I talked to this person, I talked to CFS, and I called Aunt Minnie, and I called, you know, you're going to write all this stuff down, and then you're going to have conclusions. You're going to say, I think it's best for the child to, you know, not see Aunt Minnie, but, you know, see Dad, and maybe this, or whatever. You're going to write a report, and I think you're going to have a thing on report writing. Oh, and Jane she's like the god of everything. She's great. So, anyway, my point of bringing that up is that an attorney who represents mother or father or the child has the right to call you up as a witness to testify. Maybe they disagree with the conclusions you've made, and they want to show to the judge through asking questions and answers that you don't know what you're talking about, right? You didn't do sufficient research. You didn't actually have a conversation with somebody that you did. Or if you did, you didn't listen to it. Or you didn't follow up on it. Or, right? Now that's an attack, right? Again, they're not attacking you. They're attacking the basis of your opinion, okay? That may happen to any one of you at any point. You may get an attorney who wants to put you on the stand and ask you questions because you said all sorts of great things and they want everyone to hear it. So they may flush it out a little bit more. So when you say that you think the child should be home with mom, why is it that you feel so confident that the child would be safe, you know? And then you would say, that's not in your report. Well, I just know how much the child and the mom love each other. And the attorney's going, yeah, that's what I want you to say. You know, so there's different reasons that you could be called as a witness. Doesn't happen often, but it can happen. Would not be unusual, okay? So there's tips on how to testify. It may be premature to talk about them now because this is kind of a talk you want to have right before you're going to have to testify. Emily, I think you were on the stand for 5 hours?
No, not that many, but 3.
It's like 2 hours one day, and then you had to come back and do another hour or something the next day. Right?
It was, something like that.
And you had to answer questions from 4 lawyers, the prosecutor and the 3 defense lawyers.
Something like that. That sounds right. And the judge.
And the judge asked questions.
Surprising to me, but yeah, the judge actually questions the witnesses quite a bit.
Not all judges, but Judge Townsend does. She always does. In fact, we object all the time.
We've heard from most people that our time in court is like 10 minutes tops. Why was hers so much longer?
Oh, because it was a termination hearing. And the termination hearing?
Where everybody just kind of comes together and says, this is what's going on, and lots of times those are less than 5 minutes, and that's the typical hearing. But then when there's a contested hearing, that means that there's a big disagreement and we're all going to hammer it out in court. And in that case, it was a termination hearing where they were actually trying to terminate the parents' rights, both the moms and the dads in the same hearing.
And I represented the kid, and I objected. So I was sitting at the parents' table, which most kids' attorneys don't, fighting against the state for trying to terminate my 3-year-old client's rights to her parents. It was sort of a different case. It's not usually done like that.
How did that go?
It's on appeal. Judge wrote a 42-page order or something. It was really long. It was a situation we've already talked about. Mom had been a drug addict for 10 years, and we wanted her to have one more chance. And she was only 22. And she'd never been in inpatient care. She'd only had 30 days here, 20 days here, sober for a while, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a heartbreaker. They're all heartbreakers. So the one thing about testimony, I'll just tell you here, but if you ever do have to testify, make sure you ask whoever the lawyer is that's going to put you on the stand to spend a few minutes with you going over it so that you don't feel out of sorts, or like no sea legs or however you want to call it. It does feel weird to be, it's called the hot seat. You sit in the chair, right, like this, and the judge is here and everybody else is there, right? So it's very much a hot seat. That just sitting there can be really uncomfortable for some people. The biggest thing is to maintain your own pace. This is the biggest advice I give to people, and the secret is that every question you're asked, count to 2 in your head before you answer it. So let's practice. What's your name?
Karen Bohanna.
And where do you live?
Missoula.
How long have you lived here?
30 years.
When did you become a CASA?
About a week ago.
So that's with her waiting 2 seconds. Even though the questions seem silly, it's allowing her to feel like she's in control, because that's where people get tripped up. Now let's do it without giving her the 2 seconds. And this would be a normal lawyer. I'm normal in some ways. What's your name?
Karen Bohanna.
How old are you?
39.
Really? Where'd you go to school?
Missoula.
And did you graduate?
Yes.
When was that?
1992.
Do you feel like you're being rushed?
Yes. Yeah.
And lawyers do that not so much. I mean, some do it purposely to make a person feel rushed, but really just because we just want to get, okay, give me the answer, give me the answer, give me the answer. So if you just pace yourself, right? The other trick is you really just want to answer the question that you've been asked. And that seems like so obvious. It's like telling people to floss, but people forget. So, you just got to
Get the story out.
yeah. Every witness in any trial or contested hearing or whatever, they're in courtrooms every day across the country. There's witnesses getting on the stand and testifying. Sometimes it's a 20-minute hearing. Sometimes it's a 3-week jury trial, right? Every witness who gets up there is just a piece of a puzzle, right? One witness, unless it's an unusual case, isn't going to have all the answers to everything that either the judge or the jury needs to know, right? So each witness is a piece of the puzzle. So you just answer your questions, and the lawyer puts that little puzzle piece, and then they get the next, because the lawyer's trying to create a picture or tell a story. They're doing it with these pieces, and you're just a piece of the puzzle, right? So those are the 2 main things. Just pace yourself so nobody can make you feel like you're being rushed. And really listen to the question. Emily had many, many questions where, even by Matt, who you're going to hear from Wednesday, or by me, because both of us wanted certain things out of her, right? But, she had an opinion, but like she said, she felt like the other side had really good points too. And she wasn't making the decision. She was just offering the facts. So she would get asked questions by Matt, and if she would say, I don't know the answer to that. And he would be like, well, how do you know that she's not going to keep using drugs for the next 4 years? Do you think this kid should have to wait? Emily, I don't know. I don't know if she's going to use drugs for the next 4 years. She didn't get into it with Matt. And then I would try the other way, don't you think it's important that she be able to be with her mom and blah, whatever question. And she would say, I have no idea if that's important. I can only tell you what I know. So she didn't let the lawyers make her have opinions on things that she really didn't know if she had the facts to support the opinion with. She did have opinions, and the judge asked her for them, and she gave them because the judge asked her. Generally, opinions aren't really allowed in court unless you're an expert on something and nobody else would know, If I want to ask somebody about, the trajectory of a bullet and when it explodes, I'd have to bring in a ballistics guy. He could give an opinion because he knows about trajectory of bullets, right? So, did you? I thought that's another question. Yeah.
I've done a bit of expert witness stuff and depositions and all that, but it's always been, I've been on, for one side or the other. And in those situations, before the deposition or the trial or what have you, you huddle with the attorney that the side you're working for. And first thing you do as an expert is you make sure they understand that they're not going to get you to say something that isn't true. So you need to clear that, make sure they don't ask something that they hope they can get out of you, but they're not.
Right.
But then you know, you talk about what can you expect from the other side, and it's a little different here, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, you may have a side. You may very...
Yeah, you have, but you don't have, I don't know, I'm trying to get my arms around that.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, and that's why just another reason why these cases are unique and complicated and defy a lot of the rules that even lawyers are much more comfortable with. You know, because there's so much informal chatting with, you know, the witnesses and stuff. I mean, if this was a real criminal case and CFS is a state or the prosecutor, I wouldn't be having endless chats with the CFS worker or even on the weekends without their lawyer present, right? And I do it all the time. We couldn't go forward on these cases if I didn't talk to the worker assigned to my client's case, right? So your question's good. But really, the rules of testifying don't change that much, even if are a hired gun.
We're kind of an expert, aren't we?
I don't think so, but the judges. So let me tell you about experts. Okay, so here's the deal in courtrooms. In any courtroom, any day across the country, any city, witnesses take the stand and are only allowed to give facts. Nobody is allowed to offer an opinion. Nobody. You know, if it's a robbery case, if it's a dog barking case, if it's a car accident case, nobody is allowed to get up and give an opinion on anything. That's the rule. You can only give fact. What did you see, hear, touch, smell? Then there's an exception. The exception is if somebody possesses more skill and training than anybody else in the courtroom on a particular subject, they can be tendered or offered as an expert. And if they're accepted, then they can render opinions. So, shaken baby case, you want to bring in the doctor who's an expert on shaken babies. First, you have to qualify him to show that he has this extraordinary skill and training that nobody else in the courtroom has, which of course they all do. I didn't go to med school. And then you have to, if you're the person who wants that witness to testify, then you have to offer that person as an expert. And they have to be accepted before the court will allow that person to give an opinion, okay? And so depending what side you're on, you would object to an expert or not object, and that's sort of the general rule on when people get to give opinions in courtrooms. CASAs, with no training other than, right? I mean, I don't think you know more than me after 6 weeks. You get to come into a courtroom and give your opinion.
Do CFS workers get to give opinions?
That is, well, that's a debate. That's another issue that different lawyers will answer differently. So I'll try to answer it as objectively as I can. I would say that most courts will accept them as an expert in child abuse and neglect, and therefore allow them to have opinions on child abuse and neglect. But I have successfully objected to many questions that they are asked, and one, that they aren't actually an expert in that area. Like, well, what do you think would happen to the kid if they went home? And I object. I'm like, why does this person have any more skill or training to predict or guess or speculate than I do? And I've won. So that's an ongoing debate. What are they experts in? And is somebody who has a master's in social work that works for the department able to give more or better opinions because they have this master's? How about somebody who's worked there for 10 years? Does that make them more of an expert? I don't know.
But wouldn't we be considered an expert on that kid? Because we've investigated, done all this stuff more intensely than I think anybody in the process. We'd be qualified to express an opinion on the best interest of that kid and nothing more.
I think that most judges would let you do it. And I would object and scream and yell, and I'd be like, did you ever see Monty Python and the whole, you know, where the guy is like cut off his arms, and I'd be like, I'll bite your bloody knees off, right? I mean, that's what would probably happen. That's why I'm saying the courts really defer to the CASA.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left. Can I say some stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I would say in a lot of cases it feels like the CASA does know, just because we have one case versus the other ones having 200. A lot of times we are super familiar with the details of the case, and in all of my cases I am the person who has been on the only one who's been on since the beginning. So that's something. So, and theoretically we don't have a dog in the fight. so we don't have a professional reputation to protect or anything like that. So we should be able to be objective. We might not, but we should be able to. And here's how I reconcile that, and it also helps me handle the nerves associated with testifying. Because when you go onto the stand, a lot of thoughts are running through your head, like, are they going to try to discredit me? Are they going to ask me questions that's going to reveal the holes in my investigation? And so you have a lot of anxiety associated with those types of thoughts. So the way that I handle that is to tell myself, yes, and if there are holes in my investigation, so be it. Because my job is not to sit on the stand and look good or protect myself. My job is to try to get the best truth to the judge. And so if I didn't do a good job or I had a mistake in my report, that needs to come to light. So thank you for bringing that to light, because now the judge has been given better quality information to render a decision. And then you can just disassociate it all from you. It also enables you to keep a cool head on the stand, because the attorneys do sometimes try to trip you up and try to get you flustered and to say stuff that you don't want to say. And if you have unattached yourself, it's a lot easier to keep your wits about you. And the other thing that I would encourage you to do, in addition to the pacing that Lisa's talking about, not just when you go to answer the question before you start speaking, but also as you speak more slowly than you would naturally. Allow yourself some time to reflect and pause. It's fine to ask them to repeat the question or rephrase the question. Sometimes the questions are confusing, and it's completely okay to take control of that moment. And the other thing is that I would recommend that you do not be afraid of engaging with all of the people in the case. That's something that is very scary and intimidating, especially at first, because you feel like, should I say this? Should I not say that? And well, she just said, I know that's not right, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be saying that in front of all these other people. And you're always second guessing yourself, always. And the other thing is that you're afraid to engage with other people in the case, particularly attorneys, because they may come back at you on the stand. So in the case where I was on the stand for so long, I had really engaged at a deep level with the attorney who happened to be on the other side. And he really used those conversations against me on the stand. And he really came at me. But because we had the conversations prior, he knew what my argument was going to be, and he was able to find the holes in it while I was on the stand. And that resulted in a kind of a verbal jousting match that ultimately led to a higher level of engagement and dialogue and information for the judge. So it's all to a good end. Yes, was it stressful? Yes, but actually it's also kind of fun. It's like a jousting match. It's like a game. But if you're too timid about engaging with all of the parties, it's just going to result in a less depth of reasoning and thoughtful consideration that ends up in front of the judge for her to make her decision.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, yeah, you have to come back.
Yeah, I do.